So Jim, I've heard these terms packing and cracking. So maybe you can explain how that works and also how new advanced technology is playing in all this stuff. How do politicians game the map drawing process?
Yeah, those are all good questions. So this is sort of setting the stage. So gerrymandering, as Ryan pointed out, it involves adjusting voting district boundaries so that politicians gain an advantage over the other party. And it's the boundaries and the adjustments that are important. And if we look at we have first slide up here. So if we look at this first slide, you can see that this is Pennsylvania's 7th congressional district, right after that 2010 takeover of the Republicans that Michael was talking about, where most people would say this was terribly gerrymandered. So you talk about what is a normal district, and normal district boundaries certainly wouldn't have all of the nuances that are there. They're put in there for some reason. And the reason in this case is for gerrymandering. In fact, if you go to the next slide, you'll see that this particular district was ludicrously even nicknamed the goofy kicking Donald Duck. You can kind of see that in there, a little bit of tongue in cheek, but it did a lot of disenfranchising, and it did went around Democratic areas to bring in Republican areas. So you can see it when you look at it, but now how do you do that? So they're going to change these boundaries. What are the rules they're going to use? And you mentioned, Ryan, packing and cracking. So let me just go over those. Packing is when you make the district so that you pack much more than the 50% of your opposing party that's needed to win a district. So if you have an opposing party, you stuff as many of them as you can into a district. Maybe they have 80, 90%. They win that district, but then the extra 30, 40% that weren't needed to win the district are just wasted votes. That's called packing. And then there's cracking. Cracking is when you spread your opponent's votes across a whole bunch of different districts so that they don't get to 50% in any of those. And by spreading them out or cracking them, you're also disenfranchising them. None of those votes essentially count. So it's a way of wasting votes by carefully choosing where you put the edges of your boundaries. So let's take a look in the next slide. This is just a simple district example. This is much simpler than a regular state. In this state here, we have 100 voters, 60 are blue and 40 are yellow. So 60 is the majority party. And they're just laid out in this little square layout. Now, if we turn to the next slide, how would we district this? Let's say we wanted to have 10 representatives. So we need 10 districts of 10 people each. So take a look at these three possible ways from many, many ways of how you could redistrict or district this particular state. So the left plan has reasonably shaped districts. If you take a look at it closely, you'll see that 6 seats go to the blue and 4 go to the yellow. That's quite reasonable. If 60% of the voters are blue, you expect them to get a few more seats. That's kind of a reasonable sort of ungerrymandered way of doing things. But now look at middle plan B. Here they've contoured the edges of this. This is what the blue party might choose to do. They have changed the lines in such a way that they've spread the yellow around so much that they're now the minority in every one of the districts. So blue wins every district. So they're completely disenfranchised. That's a case of cracking. But now take a look at the right-hand one. The right plan C. This is what maybe yellow would do if they were in control. They would, again, in rather contorted ways, if you look at the shapes of these things, they've sort of built districts around the concentrations of the blue. So the blue districts, the ones that are run by the blue districts, have 8, 9, or even 10 voters in them. So the blue wins those districts, and they win them by a lot, but the excess above 50% doesn't really count. And what's left is the remaining 6 districts then all go to yellow. So by cracking, they've disenfranchised those. That's just an example how you can use packing and cracking to be able to do that.
Okay, and Jim, that's great. And then just briefly, could you just tell us maybe the pros and cons of what advancing technology is doing?
Yeah, so advancing technology, there's good news and bad news. The bad news, which I'll start out with, is that advancing technology makes this much easier to do. You can do on a laptop now what used to take months to do in a smoke-filled room. You can put all kinds of different data about gender, ethnicity, education, behavioral information in, and refine these lines completely. That's the bad news. But the good news is that mathematicians have latched onto this and said, we can develop algorithms, we can come up with metrics that can measure how much things were gerrymandered. How many votes have been wasted, for instance, is a metric you can use. How compact the district is another one you can use. And finally, faster computing allows you to say when somebody proposes a particular districting plan, you can come up on a computer with millions and millions of districting plans that are just slightly different from that by moving boundaries around a little bit, and then compare them with these metrics. And if you find that the one that was proposed is more favorable of whatever the party is proposing than any of those other ones, then you know that there was something that was done. And in fact, this has actually been used in expert testimony to these commissions we've been talking about, and also in the judicial realm.